Hello guys and guides, and welcome to another tutorial here on Tuesdays on my channel. So today I have a very exciting tutorial for you all. Ever since I started doing intros and motion graphics using Adobe After Effects on my YouTube channel, I've been overloaded with a mass multitude of comments and messages asking me how I do certain things, how I do certain effects, how I use Adobe After Effects, and basically how I learned it. So today I'm going to clear up all that mystery, and I'm going to show you guys how to basically get started in Adobe After Effects so you can get better with the program and become a master of the motion graphics and the graphic effects and whatnot. So today's going to be really basic. So for all of you that have just gotten Adobe After Effects or want to get into it and have not gotten it yet, I highly suggest that you go and download it. It has a free trial in Adobe, and you can go ahead and download it. It's part of the Creative Cloud, and if you want to get it, it's subscription based, and I think it's like $20 a month. So anyways, with all that out of the way, I just want to show you guys the basic interface of Adobe After Effects and the basics of what you can do and how it works. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up Adobe After Effects. I will be using Adobe After Effects CC, which stands for Creative Cloud, and it's basically the latest version as of this video. If you're using a different version, all of this stuff should be the same. Now when you first open it, you'll be greeted with this interface, and basically this will be your main workspace for the majority of your work, and it's just like any other editor that you've used before. You have a timeline down below here. You have a project. Notice how you can switch between panels. Footage, layer, composition. We won't worry about any of that for right now. But notice how you have a project. This will be your media bin where all of your footage will go, your videos, your images, your music, whatnot. And up here you have your toolbar, basically all the tools you can use to help you make your video. You can enable and disable snapping, which basically means things will snap to edges, snap to other references, other reference guides in your video. You can change your workspace. I will get into that in detail, maybe in the next episode. And up here we have info. If you hover over part of your footage, it will show the color in RGB. Also, it will show your coordinates in the video. Right now you don't see anything because I have no layers inputted, nor do I have any composition. Right here you can preview the video once you have it made, and you can get into your characters and your effects over in this area. Down below is paragraph. It's kind of irrelevant unless you're working heavily with text. And over here you have a tracker, which we will not be getting into for much later. So that's pretty much the basics of the layout of After Effects. It looks intimidating at first, but once you really get to know it and understand it, it becomes so simple and the layout is so intuitive. So first off, let's go ahead and grab a composition. Click the Create New Composition button here, or you can right click and say New Composition. This is your first composition ever with After Effects for most of you. So if you want, you can name it the Nostalgic Hello World. I guess I'll just name it that for fun effect. Here's where you can define all the parameters of your video. Under the Basic tab, you have a few options. You can first select from a preset, which we will not be doing for this tutorial. I want to show you all the features. Down here is the width and height of your video. You can lock it to this weird aspect ratio, which I have no idea what it is or why it's there. So while we're setting it, just go ahead and unclick the lock aspect ratio. If it says 16:9, that is the standard, and you can keep that checked. All this will do is if you change this, it will change the bottom accordingly so that it matches the same length to width ratio. So let's go ahead and enter 1920 by 1080. And that is the standard HD for YouTube. You can also go down to 1280 by 720, and that is a sub HD level. Sorry, I just exited that out. I'm just gonna go right back to it. I hit enter by accident. Alright, so once you have that, you can check lock aspect ratio, and then down here you have your frame rate. Basically 30 frames per second is the default of YouTube, and up until I think a few months from now, it would limit it, YouTube would limit your frame rate to 30 frames per second even if you uploaded a video that was 60 frames per second. So for right now, we'll keep it at 30. Basically, that means how many pictures per second make up your video. That's basically what frames per second is. And if you've worked with video editing, you know what that is. Right now, the resolution is set to half. That basically means in the preview window right here, when you play back your footage previewing it, it will only play in half quality. And that's to save time when it's pre-rendering and also to be more efficient on your computer. You can set that up to full if you're not working with anything heavy in After Effects, but generally you're going to want to keep it to half because that's all you're going to be able to see anyways. When you render, this will not do anything different. It's just for previewing. Under duration, you can actually change how long your video will be. You can always go back and change this later, but it's nice to set a defined line here. So let's just go say 10 seconds is good. Right here you have milliseconds, then you have seconds, and then you have minutes, and then hours, obviously. Right now you can select the background color of your composition. You can make it any color you want. You have a full spectrum here. I'm just going to go with a black standard. And then once you're done, you can go ahead and hit OK. Advanced, this is just for advanced users. You guys don't have to worry about that for right now. Go ahead and click OK, and that'll create your composition. If you ever want to go back or change any of the parameters, you can hit Control-K on your keyboard, or you can right-click and say Composition Settings. Alright, so now that you have your composition, you can actually, in this window, use your scroll wheel to zoom in and out, or you can hit Shift / to fit it to the display. Alright, once you have that done, you can go ahead and start adding layers. Now basically layers are elements within your video that can be moved or edited or even have effects added to them to add to your video. So basically the basics of it is you right click in this open area right here, go to new, and then you can select from any one of these. Text will basically add a text layer to your video. You can type in whatever text you want and you can animate it or do it anything with it from there. Solid is basically just a any color, and it's just a little frame of that color, just a solid object. Light, that's when you're working with 3D objects, it'll add a light to your scene. Camera, also for 3D objects, which we will not get into until much later. Basically, it'll allow you to add a camera to move around in 3D space. Null objects are objects that will not show up, but you can reference with other objects using parenting or childing, if you guys know what that means. Yet again, all these lower ones are advanced and we'll get into those later. Shape layers are basically, you can add stars, octagons, pentagons, quadrilaterals, any sort of shape. You can go ahead and add that in its own layer. Adjustment layers are layers you can add effects to, and they will, all the effects you add to that adjustment layer will carry down to all the layers underneath it. It's really handy when you want to apply multiple effects to layers below one. Adobe Photoshop file, you can go ahead and add PSDs from Photoshop, and you can put them straight in here without having to export them as a standard file such as JPEG or PNG. Maxon Cinema 4D file, you can actually import Cinema 4D files directly into After Effects without rendering into there, but that's more advanced and we'll get into that later, as I said before. So right now we're going to go ahead and add a solid, and this will be a background. Now remember before how we had specified that the background of the composition should be black? Well, if you have this toggled right here, it'll show the transparency even though that you said that you want your default background to be black. If you go ahead and untoggle the transparency, it'll show the black behind it. If you go ahead and click the transparency, it'll show that there is actually no layer there and all this is transparent. When you're working with motion graphics, a checkerboard like this means that it's see-through. So let's go ahead and keep that there and then go to New Solid. This will add a new element to your timeline, and we're basically going to have that be a black solid. If I could spell, that would be awesome. Okay. So you can select the width and height of your solid. Automatically it should match the composition, or you can click this to make it match. You can select pixels, inches, or millimeters for the units, or you can go to different size pixels. Alright, once you have that, you can actually change around the color. I'm just going to go with a dark gray and click OK. Once you click OK, it'll add it to your timeline, and notice how it covers the entire frame with your dark gray object. You can then go ahead and use your regular selection tool to resize. I'm going to hit Control Z because I don't want to do that. You can use your rotate tool to rotate it. Undo that as well. You can use your hand tool to actually pan around. Zoom tool to zoom. You can click and drag to zoom into a specific area. I'm just going to hit Shift / to fit it to the frame size again. You can go ahead and click your unified camera tool to pan around the object if you're in 3D space. We do not have a 3D composition, so that will not do anything. Pan behind tool, this will basically move your anchor point. And notice when I move my anchor point, it doesn't really do anything. But when I go back to the rotate tool, notice how it, when I rotate it, it moves around that anchor point. So this is really useful if you want to go for a different sort of rotation effect. Over here, you have your rectangle tool. This will not do anything to the solid layer, but instead, well, to make my point, if you don't have the black solid selected, it won't do anything to the solid layer. It will actually add a new layer that has a shape layer on it. As you saw before, if you have a layer selected and use the rectangle tool, it'll actually create what's called a mask. Don't worry about it now, we'll get into it probably later. Right here we have a pen tool. Basically makes you allows you to make a mask that isn't of a uniform shape. Yet again, we'll get into that later. I'm just gonna undo the mask. Cool, that's pretty much it. These ones are kind of rarely used, but yeah, again, if we have more time, I will get into that later. I'm sorry if I'm saying that a lot. Anyways, getting into it, you can also access all of these parameters down below by twirling this little triangle. Notice how all your transform abilities are right here. Basically, they do the same thing. You can do your positioning, which of course you can do by just dragging. You have your rotation, opacity, which allows it to be see-through or not, etc. So that's pretty much the basics of how to manipulate an object in After Effects. Alright, so let's get into some text. Right-click, New, and Text. So right here, we can add any text we want. Over here, you can select the color of the text. Let's have it be white. You can change the font. Right now, I have DAX selected. I have no idea what font that looks like, but we'll just go ahead and type something. Okay, that doesn't look like too bad of a font. So right now, we are currently using the text tool. If you don't want to right-click and say Create New Solid, you can actually just, let me unselect this. You can actually just click your text tool and click it anywhere, and it'll create the new layer for you. Alright, going back to our select tool, let's select that, double click it to edit it again, and then we'll go ahead and select all, Control A, and let's change the font. So if you click here and select everything, you can use the up and down arrows to actually select your text. I found this really useful in finding fonts for several different projects where I didn't really know what some of the fonts were when I was going through the list, and I just wanted to try stuff out. So let's go ahead and find a nice one here. That one looks pretty cool. I'm going to select my selection tool and click outside. So that's pretty much it. Now, you may be wondering, well, this is all of the adding stuff. Now, how do I make it a video? Right now, it just looks like a picture and it doesn't do anything. Well, let's get into that real quick. This is going to be really basic, and I think I'm going to save the majority of this for the next episode. But basically, when you put an object or a motion, or you change one of its parameters over time, that is what you call, well, the act of doing that is through using keyframes. And keyframes are basically saying, let me first bring up the parameters down here. Let me twirl down transform. See how we have position here? If I click this little stopwatch, it's basically going to mark down the position it's at for this time. When I move forward, it doesn't do anything because I haven't marked down what I want it, where I want it to be at that time. So say I move it down here. Now, since we still have the stopwatch selected, it'll automatically create a new keyframe right here. Keyframes are signified by little diamonds on the timeline. So now it knows where to be at exactly 3 seconds. So when I move in between them, it takes that information and tells itself where it wants to be anywhere between those 2 points. And if I slide through, it moves from point A to point B because I have those keyframes. If I get rid of that by unclicking the stopwatch, you can see that it no longer does anything. We can also do this for pretty much any other parameter in After Effects. We can change the position, the scale, and the rotation. Notice how all 3 diamonds show up under each parameter. If we move forward to about 5 seconds, we can actually change all of these, and we'll do all of them at once. Let's change the position. Let's change the oh, that's not on the text. Alright, let's go back and select our text. Or we can select it down here. We can change the rotation. And also, we can change the scale or the size. Hold down Shift to keep it uniform so it doesn't deform. Alright, so now that we've done that, you can actually slide in between these and it transforms all by itself. So, you may be wondering, how do I play back this without dragging the playhead? Well, if you have a numpad, you can press 0 on your numpad and it will do what we call RAM previewing. Basically, it renders out the video very roughly and saves it to your RAM on your computer, which is your random access memory. That allows it for smooth playback without actually rendering out to a file, so you can see how it looks. The difference between this and just hitting spacebar is that when you hit spacebar, it's rendering in real time. Notice how it's much slower. That's because it's trying to process that information and render it while you're playing it. So if you click 0, it'll render everything out first and then play it back. It'll loop that playback until you click 0 on your numpad again. If you don't have a number pad on your keyboard, you can go up here to preview and click this. It usually says RAM preview. Alright, so that's the basics of After Effects. I really hope you guys enjoyed this. Stick around for next week. I'll go more into depth on keyframing and also show you some of the more handy tricks and effects that I use for my intros. Basically, I'm just doing this to get all of you guys up to date on the software so I can really get into the good stuff like how I do certain effects in my intros or how I put everything together. One real quick thing before we leave, if you guys want to save this to your computer as like a .mpeg or a .mp4 or any type of video, you can actually go up here to Composition and go to Add to Render Queue, and that will add it to your render queue so you can actually render it out. So for render settings, we're basically gonna click Best for now. Under here, you can basically choose whatever different format you want. QuickTime, High Compress, and H.264 encode will not be here for you. I have enabled those myself. If you want, you can click Custom and then get on into the technical specifications. I'm not going to go too in depth because if you know these, you do. If you don't, then you don't. But MPEG-4 is usually the standard for whatever, as far as I can tell. Post-render action, not really too important. Your channels, that's basically what colors you'll be getting. You can render out in red, green, and blue, which basically forms the full spectrum of colors. Or you could render out in alpha, basically meaning it's going to create a video of just what's transparent. Millions of colors, that's pretty standard. Straight, pre-multiplied, unmatted, if you know what that does, great. You can also resize it and crop it before you render it out. And if you want to if you want audio output, you can turn that on or off, or turn that on to auto, depending on whether you have audio or not in your composition. Another thing I didn't mention is that if you click spacebar, it also does not play the sound, it only plays the video. If you want to hear the sound, you have to RAM preview. In format options, you can choose the different parameters for MPEG. You can choose the level and the bitrate and whatnot. If you know what these do, then you know what to do with them. If not, just leave them at default. Click OK, and it'll save it as a custom. If you want to save it for later, you can actually go ahead and actually should be somewhere here. I think it says save. Make template. There we go. and it'll ask you for a name, and then you can save it just like I did with the H.264 encode and the QuickTime high compress. Alright, output 2, you'll basically select where you want this to go. And then once you select where you want it to go, you can go ahead and click render, and it'll save it as a video for you. So that's the dumbed down basics of Adobe After Effects. And I really hope you guys found this useful. I can't wait to get into some of the more advanced effects and showing you guys how to do all this crazy awesome stuff with Adobe After Effects. It's a really powerful tool, and I really promote it as a product. And I can't tell you guys how much skills like these are really helpful to you guys, especially if you're doing YouTube. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial next Tuesday. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Peace out.